They say you're being irrational. I say love defies logic. They say you're living in a fantasy. I say you're my only reality. They say you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. I say I'd rather break than never have held you. They say you're being too intense. I say I'm just being honest about the fire inside. They say you're suffocating them. I say I'm just trying to keep them close. They say you're being possessive. I say they're mine utterly. They say you're building a cage. I say it's a sanctuary. They say you're losing your sense of a self. I say my sense of self is intertwined with theirs. They say you're making them uncomfortable. I say my comfort is their priority. They say you're being unreasonable. I say my love is beyond reason. They say you're chasing a ghost. I say they're more real than anything else I know. They say you're wasting your life. I say my life begins and ends with them. They say you're being obsessive. I say they're my obsession, my purpose. They say you're building a shrine. I say they deserve worship. They say you're making them your everything. I say they already are. They say you're living in a delusion. I say my delusion is more beautiful than their reality. They say you're creating a monster. I say I'm creating a guardian. They say you're being delusional. I say my devotion is stronger than their doubt. They say you're going to get hurt. I say I'm already wounded, but they're the only salve. They say you're being unreasonable. I say I'm being driven by a force they can't fathom. They say you're making this harder than it has to be. I say it has to be this hard to be worth it. They say you're being too much. I say they're not enough. They say you're making them uncomfortable. I say I'm making them mine. They say this is not sustainable. I say I'll make it so. They say you're destroying your life. I say I'm building a new one around them. They say you're making a mistake. I say I'm making a vow. They say this is a dead end. I say we'll forge a new path. They say you're going to regret this. I say I'll regret nothing with them. They say this is not love, it's obsession. I say they're the same thing to me. They say you're being foolish. I say I'm being true. They say you're losing your grip. I say I'm tightening it. They say you're going to end up alone. I say I'm already alone without them. They say you're being dramatic. I say I'm being real. They say you're sacrificing everything. I say they're worth more than everything. They say, you're setting yourself on fire. I say, I'd burn the world for them. They say, you're living in a dream. I say, they're my only waking thought. They say, you're making them your prisoner. I say, I'm making them my queen, king. They say, you're being selfish. I say, I'm being devoted. They say, you're making them your God. I say, they're my religion. They say, you're losing your sanity. I say, sanity is overrated. They say, you're building a monument to madness. I say, it's a monument to love. They say, you're creating a cult. I say, they're my only follower. They say, you're being destructive. I say, I'm being passionate. They say, you're making them your obsession. I say, they're my purpose. They say, you're being consumed. I say, I'm being reborn. They say, you're making them your everything. I say, they are. They say, you're being consumed by darkness. I say, they are my light within it. They say, this is not sustainable. I say, I will sustain it. They say, you have lost your mind. I say, I have found my heart. They say, you are a danger to yourself and others. I say, I am a danger only to those who would take them from me. They say, you are a force of chaos. I say, I am a yes of love. They say, you are not yourself. I say, I am more myself than ever before. They say, you are becoming a monster. I say, I am becoming what they need me to be. They say, this is a sickness. I say, it is my cure. They say, you are beyond help. I say, I need no help, only them. They say, you are in too deep. I say, I am home. They say, you are losing control. I say, I am gaining clarity. They say, you are a slave. I say, I am a devotee. They say, you are a prisoner. I say, I am free. They say, this will end in ruin. I say, it will end in us. They said, let it go, but how do you release the air you breathe? Every cell of me screams your name. You'll forget them, they promised. Little do they know, you're the ink staining my soul. Move on, they chirp, as if you're a train station, not the blood in my veins. They whisper about boundaries. I whisper about claiming every inch of your existence. Find yourself, they advise. I'm lost, and the map leads only to you. Let them be happy, they say. My happiness is tethered to yours, a dark, unbreakable thread. They speak of freedom, I speak of the cage I've built around us. a gilded prison of devotion. It's unhealthy, they judge. What do they know of the fever that burns when you're near? They preach about independence. I crave the chains that bind us, the beautiful, suffocating dependence. You're obsessed, they accuse, as if obsession isn't the only true form of love. They say time heals all wounds, but time only deepens the scar of your absence. You deserve better, they claim. I deserve only you in all your glorious imperfection. They discuss healthy relationships. I drown in the intoxicating toxicity of our connection. Let them go, they urge. But you're the gravity, and I'm a broken satellite forever orbiting. They chatter about self-respect. I've traded mine for the privilege of your shadow. You're losing yourself, they warn. I'm finding myself in the reflection of your eyes. They prattle about red flags. I see only the crimson banner of my devotion. You're being unreasonable, they argue. I'm being honest, and honesty is a burning thing. They say it's not love, it's a force of nature, a hurricane with your name. You'll regret this, they predict. I'll regret only the moments I didn't hold you tighter. They speak of moving forward. My feet are rooted in the memory of your touch. You're wasting your time, they insist. My time is yours, a sacrifice willingly made. They talk about healing. I thrive in the beautiful, agonizing wound of your presence. You need space, they suggest. I need the air you exhale, nothing more. They preach about detachment. I'm an anchor, and you're the sea that holds me. You're scaring them, they whisper. I'm scaring myself with the depth of my need. They babble about self-preservation. I'd burn the world to keep you safe. You're pushing them away, they observe. I'm pulling you closer into the vortex of my soul. They say you're too intense. I say I'm not intense enough. You're making a mistake, they warn. I'm making a monument built of my desire. They prattle on about letting things go. I hold on tighter until my knuckles bleed. You're living in a fantasy, they say. My reality is the echo of your laughter. They say it's not worth it. You're worth every scar, every sacrifice. You're drowning, they point out. I'm breathing water, as long as it's the same water you swim in. They say you'll find someone else. No one else exists. You're being dramatic, they scoff. I'm being honest, and honesty is a wildfire. They say it's just infatuation. It's the universe collapsing into a single point. You're losing control, they remark. I'm surrendering completely, utterly, They say, you're being selfish. I'm being possessive, and you're mine. You're building a wall, they observe. I'm building a fortress around you and me. They say, you're isolating yourself. I'm creating a world where only you and I exist. You're living in denial, they state. I'm living in the truth of my devotion. They say, you're being unrealistic. I'm being faithful to the impossible. You're creating a monster, they warn. I'm creating a guardian, a protector for you. They say, you're being delusional. I'm being devoted, and devotion is a dangerous thing. You're going to get hurt, they predict. I'm already bleeding, and your name is the blade. They say, you're being unreasonable. I'm being driven by a force they cannot comprehend. You're making this harder than it has to be, they say. It has to be this hard. They say, you're being too much. You're not enough. You're making them uncomfortable, they say. I am not trying to make them comfortable. I am trying to make you mine. They say, this is not sustainable. I say, hold my hand and watch me make it so. They say, you're destroying your life. I am building a new one with you as its cornerstone. They say, you're making a mistake. I am making a promise to keep you safe. They say, this is a dead end. I say, we will carve a new path together. They say, you're going to regret this. I will regret nothing as long as I have you. They say, this is not love, it's obsession. I say, they are the same thing. They say, you're being foolish. I say, I am being true to my heart. They say, you're losing your grip. I say, I am tightening it. They say, you're going to end up alone. I say, I am already alone, without them. They say, you're being dramatic. I say, I am being real.